Welcome to the Knakal News Network. The Knakal News Network is brought to you by the Knakal Group, Cushman & Wakefield's #1 investment sales team.
And maybe back to just affordable housing. You've wrote about some suggestions that the administration could maybe implement to help this affordable housing crisis that I think we all agree is taking place. Can you share with the audience maybe some of those ideas and suggestions you made?
Yeah, sure. I think affordable housing is critical for the future of New York. I mean, we need, and it's not just low-income housing, it's really workforce housing, which I think is so critical. Housing for policemen, firemen, bakery workers, auto mechanics. I mean, where are you supposed to live in the city? Everything is so expensive. So I think we need that affordable housing desperately, and by this cockamamie calculations of saying, well, if HPD makes a loan on a building, we preserve these units, or if we say that the J51 or the Roberts decision said you can't deregulate, that all of a sudden any building with a J51, we preserved units there. That on top of the fact that every politician will say that rent regulation is an affordable housing program, where it has absolutely nothing to do with affordability. There's no means testing. Nobody knows if somebody's paying $700 a month for a one-bedroom, nobody knows if that tenant's making $3 million a year or $13,000 a year. So rent regulation is not an affordable housing program. We need affordable housing in the city. We need workforce housing. Really, the only way to get it, we need two things. One, we need the state to waive the 12 F.A.R. cap on residential F.A.Rs. That makes no sense. And secondly, we need to come up with a bifurcated F.A.R. system where you get double the F.A.R. if you're going to build residential rental as opposed to condo. And endemic in that, you will have to have a deed restriction on the residential building so somebody doesn't take advantage of the F.A.R., build a rental building, and then convert it to condo. It would have to stay through a deed restriction for 99 years. You can't convert the building, or in perpetuity you can't convert the building. But I think that way you're creating a level playing field between the value of condo land and the value of rental land. Because the way it is now, in up markets, or any even reasonably decent market, condo land is so much more valuable. It's worth about twice what rental land is worth. And if that's the case, everybody who's buying land is going to build condos. A seller doesn't say, well, I think we should have more rental units in the city, so I'm going to take half of what my property is worth. They're always going to try to maximize their price. So I think to the extent in the right areas, i.e. areas where we have great access to public transportation, F.A.R. should be doubled for rental construction. And then I think you'd see a balance between condo construction and rental construction. That would be very positive for the marketplace. And so I think those two things of, one, lifting the 12 F.A.R. cap that the state has to do, and secondly, doubling the F.A.Rs for rental construction would go a long way towards solving the affordable housing program.
Okay. Let's talk about tax reform and what you think. That's been one of the big questions, another one of the big questions that we got from a number of people in the audience. What do you think tax reform could look like? How do you think that impacts the market? We saw the chart of what the expectation of tax reform, what that meant for the market in the fourth quarter of 2012. What do you think is on the potentially legislative agenda?
Right. I think you look at tax reform from two perspectives. One from a myopic real estate perspective, and then a more macro perspective. We'll do the macro first. Generally I think lowering taxes is a very positive thing. And this is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. JFK, great Democratic president, cut taxes, the economy grew significantly. Reagan, a Republican, cut taxes, the economy grew significantly. What Trump is proposing, I think, would greatly increase economic activity. The downside, and what the Democrats are saying now, is that, all these tax cuts are going to impact or help the very wealthy, not the middle-income families. I wonder, I wasn't old enough or paid attention enough when JFK was president to see if the Republicans were bashing him the same way, saying, oh, you're just going to help the wealthy people. But the fact is, if you look at the tax structure in the country, the top 20% of taxpayers pay 88% of federal income taxes. Right? We pay, the top 20% of taxpayers pay 1.2 trillion in taxes. The next 20% of taxpayers pay only 175 billion in taxes, and the lower 60% of taxpayers pay virtually nothing. In fact, because of refundable tax credits, they get 17 billion in taxes as opposed to paying any taxes. So if you're going to cut taxes, you know, the current plan is estimated by the Congressional Budget Office that for the median household, you'll save about $420, and if you are in the upper brackets, you're going to save about $10,000. Well, if you look at the disparity between the tax burden, you can't cut taxes and not have it impact the people who are paying the most taxes the most. So it's a great talking point, but it's not mathematically possible. You can't cut taxes on people who don't pay taxes. So I think that tax cuts, both corporate tax cuts and marginal tax rate reductions, would be very economically stimulative. I think it would be a good thing for the economy. The question for real estate is what comes along with those tax cuts. And so far, the proposals that we've heard have been silent on carried interest, although there was some talk about changing carried interest rates to ordinary income. I think that would change the way partnerships are structured, might change incentives for operators who rely on equity. And it was silent on 1031 exchanges. That's a huge, huge issue for us and could impact volume very significantly. I think to the extent that it looked like when the first iterations of this came out, they talked about expensing, where you could, you know, rather than have a depreciation schedule, you could take 100% depreciation in year one. That now is applying to corporate investment, capital investment, but not buildings. So it's not as if that is not going to be as impactful. I thought that would have been overly stimulative for the market. That probably would have been a bad thing. But you know, all in all, it's the devil is going to be in the details with regard to tax reform. I think lowering rates is good for the economy, but how it impacts real estate really will be dependent upon what happens with, if there will be, apparently there's not going to be any changes to depreciation schedules, but what happens to 1031s, what happens to carried interest, number of things that could impact the market very significantly, but we need to see what those details are going to be.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple other bigger picture items. You know, recently we just saw quarterly GDP go over 3% for the first time in a while. What do you think that means for the broader overall economy?
Okay, well, clearly, you know, GDP growth is a very, very positive thing. The more the economy is tangibly growing and shifting, that will impact real estate significantly. If we have GDP growth, companies will be doing better. If we have tax breaks for companies, they'll be making more investment, hiring more people. So that is a very, very significant thing. I think, though, if you look at the economy over the long term and you see what has been most stimulative, changes in transportation actually have created the biggest increases in productivity, and the biggest increases in productivity lead to the biggest increases in domestic product. So when the railroads first came about, we had tremendous productivity growth, a huge, huge increase in GDP. And when the automobile became so popular, you know, we also saw similar increases in productivity and GDP. The big question today is, will the self-driving cars really come around? Self-driving trucks, what impact could that have on things? That really could be significantly stimulative. But you know, we need to get the economy going, whether it's through tax cuts, innovation, technology. That will lead to significant enhancements for our commercial real estate market.
And you just mentioned technology, and something you and I always talk about. How do you see it changing our industry, you know, in the near term and potentially long term?
Well, you know, technology is changing everything. I mean, you think back not too long ago, well, it is a long time now, when I started the business in '84, you know, no cell phones, no fax machines, no emails. You know, we carried rolls of quarters around with us to go to the corner phone booth and call somebody if they didn't show up at a tour. So the world has changed very, very significantly. I think technology is changing everything we do. We have clients who are looking at their businesses completely differently, looking at where tenants are coming from, what their likes are, their dislikes, how they're more likely to renew, not less likely to renew, changing the way people are doing business. It's changing our market. If you look at the investment sales business, I think fewer people are doing a lot more today because the power technology has given us. And while that's been a great thing, I think that same technology is going to marginalize us in the future. I think that we're right in the midst of the golden age of investment sales brokerage. I think that, 7, 10, 12 years from now, the business is going to be very, very different. We'll probably be more in a consulting capacity than a brokerage capacity because of technology. But, there's no avoiding it. Real estate is an analog business in a digital world. That has to change and will change, and it will have very, very profound implications for the way we do things in the future and the way our markets work.